Hi, Joe. Welcome to the Genetic Genius podcast. I'm so
Thank you so much.
excited.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. Thank you for rescheduling around the birth of our daughter. So it's a
Yay
pleasure to
for
be here.
babies.
Yeah.
No worries. It's totally fine. That's what life's about. You just got to take it by how things roll out.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned so far in having a daughter, like, or having I should just say a baby. When you wake up, when they're crying, when you plan to do something, well, just stop planning to do something, because if
No
you
more
plan to
plans.
sit down and read or meditate or something like that, it's just not going to happen. You have to do it when you're able to, not when you plan to.
Totally. Yeah, you're not the one maybe in the driver's seat for a little while, huh?
Yep. Yep.
Well, congratulations again. And I'm super excited for us to dive in today. But first, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself to our listeners and just to, tell your story, which I think is a really fascinating part of you and what you've been doing here on the planet.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I'm Joe Sheehey. I am the CEO and founder of a company named Cured Nutrition. I'm sure we'll dive into plenty of that company, plenty of the company. But who I am as a person is formerly an aerospace engineer. Now I've been an entrepreneur for the last 3 years. And the journey to get to where I am today has for sure had some speed bumps. Growing up, I should say our company exists in the health and wellness space, and we exist to help design products for individuals to live their best life. And it's been, it's a version of my mission in this world. But as a young child, I had been the one that played sports and was very active and loved being outdoors, and was taught by my parents at a very young age how to approach eating and,
Mm.
choosing proper nutrition and moving my body and trying to stay away from electronics as much as possible. And so growing up, that's who I was. I lived a very sheltered life, a safe childhood is really what it
Hmm.
was. And I'm so blessed to have had that experience and to have grown up the way in which I did. And over the course of my childhood, as my dad was a pilot for his profession, I flew a lot and we traveled
Hmm.
all the time. And it got me really interested in how things work and worked. And that's what really led me down the path of becoming an engineer.
Hmm.
But what happened in my time in college while studying to be an engineer has really defined who I am now as a person. And I went to school in Boulder, Colorado. And if you're familiar with the University of Colorado, it's a great school. Boulder
Hmm.
is known for a lot of partying. And when you get to college, you don't know who you are for yourself. You
Mm.
may believe you know a version of who you are from the messages that the world around you has given you,
Right.
and the life that you're pursuing. I mean, going to college and knowing what you're going to study and actually doing that for the rest of your life is, from my perspective, a very rare scenario. But I went to
Hmm.
school and I studied engineering, and I went from this like bubble of sheltered living to now being in college and starting to explore who I was, and also making friends from all over the country. And then really just started to lose the direction that I thought was myself. So I
Hmm.
started partying a lot and found myself hanging with individuals that did a lot of drugs and really were amazing people. But
Mm.
the person that I wanted to be and the person that I was on a day-to-day basis while in school, while in college, there was this huge dissonance between the two. There was
Mm.
a wide gap. And as I said, as a child, I was grown not only to focus on health and wellness and nutrition and taking care of myself, but also just to work hard and to pursue dreams and be
Hmm.
somebody who really brought into life something that was proof of the fruits of my labor. My dad worked so hard and my parents worked so hard, and that was instilled in me from a very young age. So in college, I did work really hard, and
Mm-hmm.
I also played really hard. And I had this, like, these two versions of myself that were, one, when I was out and about and in the partying scene, really caused by just this strong pull and long history of anxiety. I had social anxiety, but I also just, in my first year in college, had talked to my first therapist and was like, I have this, like, this voice in my head, and I don't know what it is. And now, way down the road, I've understood so much more. But when you're
Mm-hmm.
18, 19, you don't really understand that. And
Right.
so I started making a lot of decisions that were not in alignment with who I wanted to be. And my anxiety started to get worse and worse over the years. And the drug use started to get worse and worse over the
Mm-hmm.
years. And in 2012, in April of 2012, it was 2:30 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. And I found myself on the other side of a guardrail of a bridge,
Mm-hmm.
coming out of a blackout, looking down at the rocks below me, realizing that I was that far away from ending my life.
Wow.
I had gotten to the point where I didn't know who I was, and I wasn't ever making a decision for myself, for the betterment of myself. I was making a decision to fit in and to be seen and to feel like I was was loved, but deep down it was just this love that I didn't have for myself. And I've learned that since then. But coming out of a blackout on the on the other side of a guardrail of a bridge, and recognizing, wow, I am
Mm-hmm.
this far away from just letting it all go. And the next day I woke up in a hospital, and I had my parents standing over me and the doctor standing over me. And the doctor goes, we have to run some tests because you're obviously in a situation right now, and we need to understand really what's going
Mm-hmm.
on. And is there anything that I can find in your system? And, I had just several weeks ago been on spring break in college, and also just been, when coming home from that, continuing to party. And it was as you hear, it was a Tuesday morning. So that tells you
Mm-hmm.
where my priorities were sometimes.
Right.
And listing off everything that was in my system, the drugs that I had been taking, and watching my parents stand over me and
Mm.
literally just crumble. And I saw the life just fall out of them, really woke me up to the situation that I was in and how far away from who I wanted to be at my core I was. And the weeks that followed were still very difficult. I was put on antidepressants very quickly, and I continued to make bad decisions. I continued to drink. I continued to find myself just living so destructive. And after several more times of finding myself on the kitchen floor and cutting my wrists, I was something major needed to change. And my parents
Mm.
ended up pulling me out of Boulder, Colorado. I moved home, and I was actually pursuing a degree in that was going to bring me into the professional aerospace engineering world. And the decisions that I was making were not only leading me to potentially losing my life, but if I were to survive, also just losing everything that I've worked so hard for
Mm-hmm.
within my engineering degree. And since that day on the bridge until now, I would define my life and who I am as an individual that is committed to being introspective and asking myself the hard questions, and being vulnerable, first with myself, but with those around me, and finding the individuals in life that also understand that to define true health,
Mm-hmm.
that's the work that we need to do. Nutrition and training and sleep and supplements, the world that I live in now with my company,
Mm-hmm.
are so important. And then psychology and us as humans and traumatic experiences and the stories that we tell ourselves and the experiences that, the ways we've been conditioned as human
Mm-hmm.
beings are equally as important as diet and nutrition. And then, there's a whole other world. I know as you as a naturopath live in the world, that we are speaking about here, but then there's
Mm-hmm.
of course like the pharmaceutical world, and that's
Right.
what is supposed to be called health. And it
Mm-hmm.
is, and sometimes it is important at some point, but like what I started to realize was I really want to exude true health in every aspect in every form possible,
Mm-hmm.
and live by my core values of taking responsibility for myself, and then in turn serving the world and
Mm-hmm.
its greater good, and trying to better myself and better those around me every single day. And that's who I am as a human being, and what I value most every single day, and within building my business. And it comes from those experiences 8 years ago now.
Wow, what a powerful story, Joe. And, I have some similar stories myself. And I think a lot of, not every healer or person on a health and wellness journey, I think, has those stories, but a lot of us do. And it's kind of that twist in time where it's like you're given the black and the white, or like if there's a million roads that we can choose, but when we
Mm-hmm.
choose that climax of, oh, I could have gone down that road. I'm so glad I didn't. And and it takes a lot of courage to be where you're standing now. And we need people just like you to be able to pave the way towards health. So thank you
Thank
for
you.
sharing that.
Yeah, and that's the only reason that my life exists in the way that it does now, and I have been able to be an entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
is founded on just sharing and
Right.
saying, this is my story. Several weeks after that first time in the hospital, my mom had brought me to church, and watching the pain in my mom and my dad and my family during that time it was unbearable. But I
Mm-hmm.
remember the pastor of the church speaking to the time in which he sat down at a table to take a vial of medication and end his life. And when I was in that time in my life, all I felt was shame. Like I was just like, I'm embarrassed to share that this is how far
Mm-hmm.
I was down this path. And having my face in my hands and like covering myself and crying and sobbing in church, but then opening my eyes and looking around and seeing the love that everybody felt for him and sharing his
Mm-hmm.
story. It ignited everything for me, and I committed to just sharing, and it's manifested itself in so many different ways over the years, but that's where it started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when we speak the truth about who we are, it's amazing when people come forward, right? They want to
Yeah.
hear our story. They want to know how we got to the place where we are, and because it helps them to heal and helps them to open up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
100%.
yeah, totally. One thing I really loved about your website, which I wanted to talk to you about, is just there's a thing it says how connecting with like humanity and sharing the connection with the stewards of the plants and the healing power of nature. And I'm like a super plant lover myself. And I just wanted to open that conversation about how you got that connection. And, you talked about that healing connection, but where did the plants come in? Because that's such a
Yeah.
fascinating aspect.
Yeah. And thank you for asking that, because it's so important to the whole story. And so growing up in my family, my parents have both struggled with anxiety and both depression their entire lives. And so I actually watched my entire life, and my mom was a nurse, but I watched my entire life the way in which not only she would be prescribed pills, but the way in which she also used them, and not improperly, but the way they were directed. And
Hmm.
it seemed like a lot to me.
Hmm.
And coming from her side of the family, having alcoholism and addictions, of course, as a young child, I don't really understand that. But
Right.
I did visualize and see not only the pain that was caused from that side of our family, but also the way in which my mom would go see therapists and
Mm-hmm.
doctors, and there was so much medication. And so when I actually first started becoming a user of cannabis, I used it in a way in which, when you would look at it in combination of the years of me partying, was actually not one and the same. So what I mean is, I would use cannabis when I was younger, when I went golfing, when I went
Mm-hmm.
hiking, when I went and sat down to draw or be creative.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when it was all jumbled together in college, it was like, well, this is all bad.
Right.
But I started to recognize, as I started to, I was a runner big time after I went through those really, really dark years
Mm.
of depression, and it actually helped pull me out of it. But in running, spent a lot of time outside in nature, and also just trail running and seeing and connecting with the earth and this
Mm.
planet in such a different way. And as someone who was sober for several years, and I would not consider the use of marijuana, not saying defining you as not being sober, but it's different for everybody. So
Right.
I can't
Mm-hmm.
like say that that's not true for everybody. But for me,
Mm-hmm.
I recognize that, okay, well, so I've changed my life and I've pulled myself out of this very dark situation, and the way I've made decisions in the past. And then I started to, and cannabis in Colorado became legalized. And I said, well, this is interesting to me. And I've heard people use it from a calming perspective, and people that have anxiety. I was like, well, like, how about I give this a try? And
Mm-hmm.
started to use CBD and THC, and then also recognized that in the points in my life in which I did use it without the partying, I was like, well, I wasn't living destructive. I was actually
Mm-hmm.
living in a more expansive way. I was
Mm-hmm.
viewing this world for its beauty, and I was slowing down. And so I really started to say, like, not only did I have this experience as a child, and then experience myself when I was depressed and saw therapists right after I spent that time in the hospital, but it was instantly medication. And again, like, it's very important and proper for some people, but for me, I wanted to see what else was out there.
Right.
And I started to
Expansion.
combine all these pieces. And that's where I really realized, I was like, I think there's another answer, there's another possibility. And what you're speaking to is the truth, is within the use of cannabis, and to be completely transparent, psilocybin, I've
Mm-hmm.
found a connection to nature in such a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And within that, as you see in our core values as a company, like, we value nature because our true nature as humans is, we are one with each other, but we are one with this earth, and we are
Mm-hmm.
one with the plants. And within the use of certain, what I would call medicinal plants now, and fungi, I see that connection, and it's very, very clear. And to me, it just is so important for us to all have these conversations, and not say that one way is better than the other way, because that's not the approach that's going to help anybody change their mind. It's us
Mm-hmm.
being open minded. And within that, that's what's developed my love for nature and what exists in nature, and then just the connection.
That's so true. And I really like what you said about, opening up the doorway for exploration. If we don't have the communication, because we're all the same, we come from the same aspects of of the cell, and if we don't open up to every aspect of the earth, and there's so much for us to learn. And we have forgotten so much about where we came from, about, how we used to use plants, and how we used to love and treat animals and each other. And I think, and learning about plants and reigniting people's passion and their education is so empowering for the new direction of health.
Yes. And that word that you said, forgotten, it's so true.
Mm.
We have forgotten, and we forget all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we forget all the time that, hey, I'm an infallible human and I make mistakes. And just like I think I'm right sometimes, but I'm actually wrong, and make decisions that hurt others and don't mean to, but just as I do that, so does everybody else. And so there's two sides to everything, and we are infallible, and we forgot that. We forgot that, because if we could remember that, I mean, forgiveness should always be possible, but I understand some situations are different. But we have to remember that, to forgive and to release.
Right.
And when we talk about what's trapped in the body and what health really is, we have to remember and we have to release. And so I really appreciate you saying that, because it's true. How old is this planet? How old is the human race? And we're here in what we call 2020, the year, but it's not 2020 years. We've been around for a long time.
Right. Totally. Exactly. And, you know, when it comes to forgiveness, it's such a big aspect of us forgiving ourselves, you know, and that's really, I mean, the other people, they're not really judging us. We're judging ourselves, right? You know,
you're so right.
And when we can release that, I mean, we can do anything we want to do.
You're so right. Dr. Jade Tita, I did a podcast with him recently.
Oh, yeah.
And I was asking him a question. I was asking him about healing and therapy and forgiving the younger version of myself, but also wanting to, in going through that situation and seeing where I was in more or less life traps with myself, I believe that you start to recognize that more in others around you. I wouldn't say, I mean, I think it's true. I think you start to realize, oh, well, we all have these protectors and defense mechanisms, and they come out in so many different ways. And for me, it came out in working really, really hard. And in college, it was like I'm working so hard to the point where I had to lose myself on the other end of the clock. But what I said was, within that journey as individuals, how do you approach others and want to help them through the same forgiveness of ourselves and moving into the new versions of ourselves and releasing patterns and protective mechanisms? And Jade goes, well, if you ever get he goes, if you ever get frustrated by somebody, you need to look at yourself first. And I was
right.
Like,
So true.
I was like, oh, you're right, Jade. And I was like, well,
Yeah.
I just want, I was like, how do we help others? And he goes, well, if it's something that's annoying you and frustrating you, most likely you need to look at yourself first, but that doesn't mean you still can't help others uncover patterns and whatever it may be. And I was like, I love
so
you.
True.
Thank you for saying that.
So true. Yeah. I mean, it's all about how we're looking at ourselves. And when we're have the open window or the doorway or the mirror, right? The reflection of how we can be for others. And you know, for me personally, I just want to be like, have fun, like, you know, and I feel like if I'm doing that and I'm having fun and enjoying life, then I can be that, like, I don't know, beacon of light for others around me to have fun and show them there is a way for them to be healthy and to have fun too.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you hold fun, or when you hold, so as fun being a core value, when you hold that near and dear to you, I think it's important for us as individuals to understand values like that, because you can edit and guide your life based on something that truly is a lot more simple than the way that we complicate life at times.
Totally right. We can complicate things really, really deeply.
Yeah. And I'm good at that too.
Right. Totally. Let's backtrack just a little bit, because you mentioned cannabis and cannabinoids. And I love, there's always a little bit of confusion, I feel like, with people just like kind of like understanding. And I love for us to kind of like lay a little groundwork before we kind of dive in a little deeper.
Absolutely. Yeah. So just describing cannabinoids and, you know, giving the differentiations, or what specifically would you like me to dive into?
Just, I think, oh, sorry, that wasn't clear. Yeah. Just explaining what cannabinoids are. I think that would like lay the groundwork for people, because I know the understanding, people that don't understand think that everything is just marijuana and THC. There's not like kind of and there's very differentiations of that, or many differentiations. So I think if we have a little bit of cellular kind of like groundwork, then it will lay the good foundation for that.
Perfect. Yeah. So great question. And you're so right. So if we think about cannabis as a genus or a genome, if you would look at it as a tree, you would have cannabis at the top, and then below that you would have hemp on one side and you would have marijuana on the other side, or
Mm-hmm. In the family
as
tree.
we classify them today. And the
Right.
differentiator between the two and how they're regulated within the US is hemp is cannabis with less than 0.3% THC by dry weight. And
Mm-hmm.
marijuana is cannabis with essentially greater than 0.3% THC and is
Mm-hmm.
then regulated on a state by state level. And hemp is legalized on a federal level. And then for a while, states were trying to figure out how to treat it. But when we speak about cannabinoids, there
Mm-hmm.
are over, I believe now they're saying over 100 cannabinoids in the cannabis plant. And when I say THC or tetrahydrocannabinol, I'm
Mm-hmm.
speaking about one cannabinoid, and there's
Mm-hmm.
over 100 in the plant. And then when we speak about CBD, cannabidiol, that's another cannabinoid. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what the idea or concept of the differentiation between hemp and cannabis, and then, or sorry, hemp and marijuana, and
Right.
how they're regulated. And you can get the cannabinoids from really either version. Of course, if you're
Mm-hmm.
getting it from hemp, there's going to be very, very low concentration in THC. And then from
Right.
marijuana, probably higher concentrations of THC. But then again, there's still several or hundreds of other cannabinoids. So other
Mm-hmm.
ones that are very interesting to individuals right now and are most, I guess the best way to say it, available within the
Mm-hmm.
plant, like they are expressed by the plant.
Right.
And they're, breeders try to express certain cannabinoids in different amounts, but CBG is also starting to be
Mm-hmm.
more prominent, CBN, CBD. And what that is just really how the plant is bred. You can
Right.
express different genetics by breeding a plant in a certain way. And so when
Mm-hmm.
we speak about CBD oils, typically if you get a full spectrum oil, what you are getting is an extract from the hemp plant,
Mm-hmm.
and it has all the cannabinoids that might show up on a test given basically the like specificity or how fine they can get.
Mm-hmm.
But you'll see CBD, you'll see CBG, you'll see CBN, CBC, CBDV, and then THC you'll see in low
Mm-hmm.
concentrations. And that's considered a full spectrum oil. And you'll also get within that extract, if it is basically coming from a crude or the least refined version of the extract,
Mm-hmm.
you'll also find terpenes, which are the aromatic parts of a plant. And you can
Right.
think of lavender as a good example of a terpene, but of course, in the cannabis plant, there's different versions of it. And so that's kind of a breakdown of
Mm-hmm.
what cannabinoids are and how they're found in the plant. And then within the body, we have the endocannabinoid system, or the
Mm-hmm.
ECS. And that system can be regulated by exogenous cannabinoids, so us taking cannabinoids
Right.
from a supplement or from smoking marijuana or an edible, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
Or it can be modulated or affected by other things like
Right.
our water intake, or
Mm-hmm.
you know I think I actually, like black pepper for example, I think
Mm-hmm.
would modulate your endocannabinoid system. So that's the system within the body. And then the receptors basically, like if we spoke about CBD, it's actually a
Right.
modulator,
Mm-hmm.
versus where other cannabinoids are almost like they serve as like a lock and key system. So
Yep.
depending on the cannabinoid, they might attach directly to the receptor, or they might just modulate the receptor, and that has different effects within the body. And the
Mm-hmm.
endocannabinoid system at its basic level would be viewed as something very important for achieving homeostasis in the body, or balance.
Right.
And that might be your sleep wake cycle or mood or appetite. So hopefully that's a good
No, that's great. That's
intro.
perfect. Yeah, that's great. And so each of those, because of the plants have different constituents and the way that they affect the body, so each of those can then have a different effect on the neurotransmitters, for instance, and how we're going to have a response when we're ingesting that particular constituent.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll leave it to you to be the one that I did the assist and then you dunked it for me.
Boom. Right in the basket.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I love that's my like fascination with CBD is that there's so many, like really like what you said about how there's so many different aspects because people don't think about, I don't know, let's just say broccoli. They don't think about there's so many different things that we can get from broccoli, but it's the same when we're talking about any plant or any medicinal. It's not just,
Hmm.
say, oh, well, what's your favorite medicinal herb for relaxation? I'm like, well, one plant does more than just one thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what I really like that you hit upon that because it's really important because I think that's a key about how the use of CBD and also a lot of the other medicinal herbs that you have in your products is that they're doing a lot of other work. And then when they're combined together, they create this amazing synergistic like rainbow of effect where it's just like doing all these different things in the body.
Yeah. Wow. Like I deeply appreciate that explanation because when we go to create a product, we have a clinical herbalist here in Boulder, Colorado, and she typically works like with an individual. So she'll create a custom blend
Hmm.
specifically for that person. So if I, as a company, were to say, hey, I want to help this, and this person, like, of course, like creating a custom blend
Hmm.
is for an individual based on their understandings. And if you understand herbs very well and understand that practice, like you can create that custom blend, but creating a product that will be beneficial for the majority. I can't say everybody
Right.
because
The
sometimes it's
masses.
not going to work, but
Right.
for more people
Right.
really takes a huge amount of research and development. And that's exactly
Hmm.
what we did within creating the supplements that we have that are in capsule form, Rise, Aura, and Zen. And really what we did with those products was we created this version of basically like three main
Hmm.
constituents. And
Hmm.
one is functional mushrooms, one is cannabinoids, and then one is adaptogens or
Hmm.
just like traditional Chinese herbs is how we state it.
Hmm.
And our herbalist, when she created these and we did the R&D, she looks at every single component and goes, okay, well,
Right.
this is warming, this is cooling, this is wet, this is dry, this is the here are possible contraindications, which is
Hmm.
so important when creating a supplement rather than just throwing the kitchen sink into a
Right.
capsule or into a
Yeah.
powder and saying, look at all these herbs that we have in our product.
Ta-da!
We have really good
Right.
marketing, and so you should
Yeah.
buy our product.
Right. No, and a lot of products are out there like that, and that's
Yeah.
why they're not working.
Exactly. And it's not
Yeah.
it's so unfair to consumers. So
Mm.
from our standpoint, we will take the extra step and go the extra mile to create a product that we know is going to work for our consumers, but also just stands on integrity.
Right.
It's so important. If you're going to cut your margins down a little bit to have better integrity, that's what we as humankind deserve. So of course, like as I run a company, like cash flow is important.
Right.
I am like capital is important, but there's so much more to running a company than just this idea of
Hmm.
what's our bottom line, how much profit can we make, how much product can we move. And when, for example, with CBD, when something becomes what unfortunately I would say at times is trendy, bad players can exist.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so
Hmm.
I truly think that if we can have platforms like this that you're creating yourself, and more individuals can hear the
Hmm.
way we as companies think about building products, and then you from really the expert end of the health and wellness world, like have
Hmm.
conversations and make sure we're all doing something that's for the greater good. I'm really excited to see where products go because you can
Hmm.
really create some amazing things just with nature in its most natural form.
Totally. And I'd love for us to talk about mushrooms because you mentioned that just poof, like quickly as a side note. And that's a huge part of your product line.
Yeah.
And what made you decide to, like choose mushrooms? I mean, I love using mushrooms in my formulas. I use them a lot because for me, I like having that like what's a good way to describe it? It adds this piece of the earth that's really connected because the mycelium goes all around the earth. So then you have this like connection where you're allowing not only your body to have this cellular connection throughout where everything is communicating, but then you're also having this communication with the plants all around the
Yeah,
world because they have that inner communication. That's like my little side note, but I'd love to hear what your
I love
reasoning
it.
is.
I love it. Yeah. So we have used functional mushrooms in our products since the beginning of 2019. And when we started our business, it was specifically CBD. But one, could see how quickly it was catching on, and also knew that as a company to be special, we had to do
Hmm.
something a little bit different. So I had, as I mentioned, had spent, I don't think I had any alcohol for probably 4 years after
Hmm.
college. And 3 years, around 3 years after college, I actually, and within college, had used psilocybin, but used psilocybin by itself about
Hmm.
3 to 4 years after college. And as I said, like, was recognizing I was like on a hike and like, wow, that tree is like breathing and talking to me, and there's something going on there. And
Right.
so, as you speak about the connection, it was something to me that I said, well, if you look at the way the cannabis industry, so I kind of had an entrepreneurial hat on, but if you look at the way that the cannabis industry is progressing and will continue to progress, CBD is widely accepted right now,
Right.
or I should say widely used,
Especially where
and
you are, because you're in Colorado.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
more accepted, and the regulations have moved in the correct direction. And so, but once individuals are introduced to CBD, and could potentially be individuals that say, I will never use THC, I
Mm-hmm.
would imagine that a lot of people will change their mind because they'll actually
Right.
start to see that THC in of itself isn't bad. I mean, we were conditioned as kids thinking
Right.
the DARE program and marijuana was included in that, and say
Mm-hmm.
no to drugs. And so, I mean, one of the things that I've heard so many times over the course of my life, when, asking somebody if they wanted to try an edible or just use marijuana,
Mm-hmm.
no, I don't want to lose control. And I'm like,
Right.
you'll be in the most control you've ever been in. And you'll probably, if you were driving a car, drive the slowest and safest you ever would, you know, but
Right.
there's such a misconception. So to
Yeah,
speak about
exactly.
cannabinoids,
Mm-hmm.
or to speak about mushrooms,
Mm-hmm.
I recognized that psilocybin was really, really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And as CBD is one small piece of the cannabis world, psilocybin is one small piece of the
Right.
fungi world.
Mm-hmm.
And so I truly believe that in the future, and actually it's already happening, psilocybin will be used more
Oh yeah, it
for
is happening already. Mhm.
therapy
Right.
and helping individuals heal trauma and
Mm-hmm.
repattern and reestablish or develop for the first time new connections within the brain. And that's what
Right.
you speak to. Many individuals look at the mycelium and say there's this like mirror image of the human brain and the way that
Mm-hmm.
messages travel. And so I was just like, well, I think that as a company, we should continue to innovate and really be on the front line of product innovation and understand where the health industry is going. And as I mentioned, like, what's been so important for me underneath all this is therapy and
Mm-hmm.
psychological healing and
Mm-hmm.
emotional healing. And psilocybin has been a huge part of that for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as I have the passion for that, I also have the passion for all functional mushrooms. And so, as I started to explore functional mushrooms and understood, reishi having its calming effects, and then,
Mm-hmm.
turkey tail and chaga, the immune boosting components,
Mm-hmm.
and lion's mane and cordyceps, which a lot of people use for working out or just sitting down to write a paper or
Mm-hmm.
work. I said, wow, this is really powerful. And that's the best way to shift the narrative. So I
Right.
wanted to make my mission. Let's speak about functional mushrooms. Somebody may say mushrooms and they may think magical mushrooms. And if we just say psilocybin and speak about the power within that, we can take the narrative from over here and start to shift it to here and
Mm-hmm.
understand that this is all of nature,
Right.
and there is so much to be learned from it. And that's where we really started to get more and more excited and start to really develop the functional mushroom products. And same thing with with
Mm-hmm.
all the herbs. But I am such a lover of mushrooms, culinary mushrooms, functional
Mm-hmm.
mushrooms, psilocybin. I think that we've just scratched the surface
Oh yeah, there's
of
so many
what
mushrooms.
the power really is there.
Totally. Yeah, that's great. I love that explanation. And it really is, that knowledge that you're saying and that power and shifting the narrative because we have had this controlled way of thinking
Yep.
for too long, and I think we're shifting out of that. We're seeing a huge shift on the planet, especially over the last 15 months. We've seen a big shift on the planet, and we're going to continue to see that. But I really liked what you said. It's like we're opening the new book to new chapters for people to be like, well, I'm just going to read this chapter today and see what happens.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, when I'm working with patients too, it's like helping them to learn about, open their curiosity. Like, what is that herb? How can I learn about it? How can I start to use it in my life? It's not that you're just like going to a health food store and just picking something off the shelf and then taking it, because it's a totally different thing. You don't have the connection with the
Yep.
plant or the knowledge. And then it's just like you're just taking a piece of toilet paper.
You might as well be,
Right.
because our brains are also very power, and the power of the placebo and our thought. So you never know, you could be eating a
Right.
piece of tissue paper and
Right.
actually seeing that something's improving. But
Right. Yeah. It's all, yeah. Placebo effect totally is true. Okay. So we talked a little bit about the cured nutrition line. And there we talked about the CBD, and you also have like a couple different strengths within that line, correct? And if you could just mention, like, how do people kind of like navigate that,
yeah.
about like, how should I choose a low strength, full strength, extra strength? I think that would be good for our listeners to kind of know, because that's a little bit of a new person to try
Mhm.
and CBD, a newbie, a virgin on the road might need a little bit of help there.
Yeah, great question. And we can't like say like recommend one specific like dosage from a
Right.
milligram
Right.
standpoint, like saying it works for this. But as in general, what we've done is we've developed three concentrations based off of just feedback and
Mm-hmm.
anecdotal understanding of how
Mm-hmm.
our users have used the product and ourselves. And so we have three different concentrations: a low, a full, and an extra strength. And we designed those to say, if you are a beginner, the full strength product is the best place to start. And there's 25 milligrams per milliliter in
Mm-hmm.
that. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're using a tincture, you shake it up, you put the dropper underneath your tongue, you hold it for 30 to 60 seconds. And if you are somebody that actually does feel the calming effects, you'll probably feel it within 15 to 20 minutes or so.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
other individuals, it takes a long time. And
Right.
so that's why we can't, it's like, well, it's just no
Everybody's
one size fits
individualized.
all.
Yeah.
Um, but some individuals that want to use it from like a recovery standpoint and helping with aches and pains
Mm-hmm.
or anything like that might notice that they don't immediately notice the calming effects, but just like implementing a proper diet, it takes time. So it
Right.
may be 2 to 3 weeks where you start to build up a saturation within your system that is at the level of which your body requires. And I've had some people say, oh, I stopped taking CBD and then my quad started to hurt again. And so they didn't even
Right.
notice it while they were taking it, but as soon as they started to come off, they started to
Yeah.
notice it. So just, it's a really, I mean, our tagline is your daily dose, and it is something to
Mm-hmm.
really take daily, because each individual's cannabinoid system is different and is going to
Mm-hmm.
require a different amount. But the
Totally.
low strength, we really designed that one almost as like a booster. So
Mm-hmm.
if you were taking any of our other products and wanted more of the calming effects, you could go for like add in a low strength, which would be
Mm.
another 10 milligrams. And it could serve as, if you're using our rise product, which is for mental clarity and energy and focus, it serves as like a balancing agent. So think of like drinking a cup of coffee
Mm-hmm.
and taking some CBD, and the CBD takes the jitters away. So it's like the
Right.
balancing component. So the lower end is probably just like a booster to combine it with any of our other products if you feel you might need a little bit more CBD. But if you
Mm-hmm.
were just going to try a CBD tincture by itself, I would recommend a full strength tincture. And then the extra strength is basically just double the full strength concentration. And
Double
so
the
it
death
could,
shot.
yeah, it could, if you took half a dose, it could last you just twice as long as the full strength.
Right.
Or you may notice that you need more. And there have been some studies out there that are showing within dogs, for example, and my dog actually has seizures, idiopathic seizures. And
Mm.
last time I took him to the neurologist, the doctor was saying that it was around like 2.5 milligrams per kilogram is what some of the studies
Mm-hmm.
are showing
Mm-hmm.
for animals. So for my dog, he weighs around 60 something pounds, and it would be a little over or under 60 milligrams of CBD per day for
Mm-hmm.
him specifically. And some
Right.
of the studies around sleep are higher, maybe towards like the 100 milligrams per
Mm-hmm.
day.
Right.
And so if you were taking just CBD, it might turn out to be taking a lot by itself. So that's
Mm-hmm.
another reason why we said, okay, well, we want to create these other products that can be used in combination. But new user, I would probably start around 25 milligrams and just start slow, go slow and increase it,
Mm-hmm.
and know that you can't overdose on it. So like I had my
Mm-hmm.
dog drink a whole bottle and he slept most of the day, but he was fine. It's very safe.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great information for the listeners. And also, I think it really helps people to feel, I liked how you said it was safe, because I think people have a little bit of caution, which you should always have caution when you're using a new herb anyway,
Yep.
and then it allows your body to recognize the plant and feel it. And some people, like you said, it's individualized. You got a lot of other things going on, and your system could be blocked
Yep.
and you might need to open things up and do some detoxing for you to feel the benefits of the plant. But that could be of anything from the herbal side of the world to CBD to
Yep.
fungi. It's all individualized. So that's great.
Yeah, and you're so right because they're really powerful.
Right, totally. I really like how you have this synergy of the three lines together. And can you just give an example of how you would use kind of the three together to have this like superpower?
Yeah. So with Rise Aura and Zen
Mm-hmm.
specifically, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we I love this question, and it's been integral to creating like this your daily dose concept. And how we developed this concept was through the brain gut body model. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you think about an individual, think about a human, and in studying some of the most successful people in this world has been like something of extreme interest of me. And Tim Ferriss is somebody that I absorb a
Mm-hmm.
lot of his content, and he's got like the Tools of Titans and all these books, and you're like what's this underlying formula that's underneath these
Right.
individuals that we call successful or whatever you name it? But there's this routine, and if you
Mm.
if you think about the routine, there's these components of lifestyle that if you nail them, if you have like this short checklist, you're going to feel really good.
Mm-hmm.
And so if your nutrition is proper, then you're going to feel really good. If you're able to set a goal for yourself and accomplish that goal, or cross a task off a to-do list, that
Mm-hmm.
feels really good.
Right. Like gold
And
star.
yeah, exactly. And then and then you and you're going to have pursuits in life. So we
Mm-hmm.
need to have some type of like something for energy and allowing us to pursue those goals and dreams of our life. And then when it comes to the nutrition, well, you can have very, very strong and proper nutrition, but sometimes you need a little extra help. And
Mm-hmm.
one of our that gut health product that we've created to support a proper diet has
Mm-hmm.
prebiotics in it, and it has vitamin D in it, and chaga and turkey tail mushrooms, which are really powerful
Mm-hmm.
for your immune system and overall gut health. So it is a supplement to living this brain gut body model. And of course, with body, we just speak of sleeping at night.
Right.
recharging, pressing the reset button every single night. So brain was rise, let's pursue our heart's dreams. And then
Mm.
gut is the aura product. So we said aura because when you feel good on the inside and you're digesting food and you're utilizing nutrients, you glow, you have an
Mm.
aura,
Mm-hmm.
you exude that feeling. And
Mm-hmm.
then zen is the relaxation and sleep body component product. So the your daily dose, we said, okay, well, we wanted to create 3 products that utilize CBD, functional mushrooms, adaptogen herbs, and were for those 3 components of your day. And if you can put those all together, you have built this formula that I feel like I've deduced from this simple thing that
Right.
we feel like is so far reaching, but it's
Mm-hmm.
actually not. And if we don't have to make a bunch of money in this life, we just have to enjoy and have fulfillment. And I really
Mm-hmm.
think that as humans, we want to see the fruits of our labor. Eating is most necessary, and proper eating is
And
most
fun.
necessary, and sleep. And so
Yes.
that's where we came up with that model.
Nice. Oh, I love it. It's so magical and so synergistic to have those 3 components. And you explained it beautifully in that mind, heart, gut connection.
Yeah.
It's all those 3 together. And, this kind of ties into another little question I wanted to ask you. I love all the sacred geometry in your labels. And what was kind of like the inspiration behind that? And then does it have a synergistic effect with the specific formula? And is it like, because what is it? What's his name? He's the guy that did the with the water and the words on the water. I can't think of his name right now. Anyway,
Oh,
Masur Masura Amoto. But anyway,
I believe
yes.
that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So was that part of your idea that the labeling, anyway, I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah, you're right on track. It's so I used to be an engineer, and
Mm-hmm.
mathematics are so interesting to me and always will be. And so is physics and science and space. And if you are to break life down into its like simplest component and understand that like fractal patterns, as
Mm-hmm.
fractals repeat and develop shapes that get bigger and bigger, or like a snowflake,
Mm-hmm.
and each has its own like geometrical pattern. What the sacred geometry came from was that concept of within nature, the building blocks are
Mm-hmm.
these fractals, or we're all made up of simplistic but then complex geometrical patterns and systems.
Right.
And within the world of psychedelics, but also just like not even I'm not looking for psychedelics, I'm looking for the word of just like altered states,
Mm-hmm.
really, of altered states of consciousness, which can be achieved through meditation, through so many different things besides
Right.
psychedelics. So I won't just say that that's it, but you see those fractals, you
Mm-hmm.
see those patterns,
Mm-hmm.
and there's something there. I don't know
Totally.
what it is, but there's something there. And so
Yeah.
that was a huge inspiration for the way we designed our packaging,
Mm-hmm.
and tried to also portray a message
Mm-hmm.
through the sacred geometry and the patterns. So like for rise, we have a sun that's like gleaming, and then we have a lotus for aura, and then a moon for zen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taking the natural components and really creating that synergy that you speak to. And we spent a lot of time and we had a lot of fun with the line work with our branding company, and they did a great
Mm-hmm.
job. And it's I actually have sacred geometry all over my body. So
Oh, awesome. That's great.
yeah,
Yeah, in
I
my new
love it.
book, I have a lot about sacred geometry coming out in April. So I love sacred geometry, and it's such a great way for people to relate to that vibrational aspect of the plant world, which I think is
Yes.
that, the other like chapter and narrative that you were talking about, because this opens up, they're like, oh, whoa, what's this? Why is it on this container? What is it doing for me? And I think the more
Yep.
that we can create curiosity when it comes to the world, and people ingesting supplements or a product, it helps their healing process, because then it just opens up a new doorway for their healing.
Yeah. I
Mhm.
love that you said vibrational level, because it's true.
Mhm.
Everything is vibrating, and
Mhm.
it's what emits the photons that allows us to see things.
That's right.
And that's why I love physics.
Yeah, me too. I loved physics in school. It was great. It was super fun. I had a great
My favorite
teacher.
class.
Yeah, it was awesome. So, and okay, so as we're wrapping up things today, I think we talked about all your great products. And so one of the things that we talked about earlier is that the listeners could, one, they could get a wonderful bonus if they used a code for your
Yes.
checkout, which is Genetic Genius, and they could get 20% off, which is so generous. Thank you so much, Joe. And then they can experience the wonderful products yourself and themselves. And there's a lot of great things for them to choose from. And there was one thing I wanted to ask you, if I have a second.
Yeah.
You have a little sample, I think I saw too. Is that a great way for people to kind of be able to start the different, it's like a little package, right? Where it has the different samples together?
Yes, great question. The sample pack has two different CBD gel capsules. So
Mm-hmm.
there's an extra strength one that is full spectrum, and so that's the stronger one. And then there's a pure THC version.
Mm-hmm.
So those two are in that sample pack, but Rise, Aura, and Zen that we just spoke about are in that sample pack. So if you ever wanted to try those before purchasing a full size product, we have that. And we're here as a company, as individuals, to answer any further questions that anyone has. Support at Cured Nutrition, curednutrition.com, and we're also on Instagram, and have our own podcast named the Cured Collective. So yeah,
Yeah.
we are here to help individuals, and if it means answering a question that doesn't even make you a customer, we want to answer those questions. We want to
Mm-hmm.
help individuals and explain why it is we what we do, why it is we do what we do, and have every individual understand what our products do and why we created them. And yeah, that's us.
Awesome. I can see your passion for your products, and it just comes through in the way that you talk about them. And I can't wait for our listeners to check them out themselves and to experience something they might not have experienced before, which is super exciting.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
One last question as we're wrapping things up today, Joe. If you had an unlimited budget right now, what would you do with that to make the biggest impact and shift on the planet?
Wow. Plant hemp everywhere.
Nice. Awesome. That's a great one. Ding. I give you that one.
Yeah,
I think that would be an easy one to do. We could totally do that.
we need to do that.
Yeah, that's
We
a really good
absolutely
one.
need to do that.
That's awesome. Well, thanks, Joe. It's been such a joy to have you on this show today. Thanks for giving me your time and all your knowledge.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure.